Hi there, I'm working on some new projects. Here's one example of it. I hope you can see it. It's a blinking LED coming from a PIC microprocessor, which is cool because until now I haven't been able to program them in C, which is of course the way you get the biggest speed out of them. So that's my proof of concept. It's going to be building a heliostat controller system with it, with another person called Michel Blom. Hopefully going to be ready soon, so you can build your own heliostat system at home and heat it. There's some other projects that I'm working on, but I cannot really discuss them right now. What I want to talk about is this whole Neuro, Northern Euro and Guilder resurgence. It's really not going to help one bit, and there's a big risk. There's some big risks at the moment. There's this belief that if we go to the Northern Euro, that we can keep the wealth in the northern regions and not give the money to the southern regions. That would be the case, not if we would manage that currency, because of course it's paper currency, and if you have a euro or a Neuro or a Guilder, it doesn't really make a big difference. It's going to be the same institutions that emit those currencies, by the way, and they all going to still say that they have a central bank or the IMF to talk to. So it's not going to change one bit. What would make a change is if the Northern European countries were actually in control of the oil supply, or a oil supply that was sufficient to run their industries. Now Holland has Shell, which is one of the biggest oil companies in the world, and it has lots of work to do because it's invited to work in Iraq, it's working in South America. That's all horrible in the climate perspective, but it could be a blessing if you could make a currency that, like the Northern Euro, that would be the currency you need to use if you want to buy oil from Shell. So let's say Shell bases itself in Northern European countries and says to everybody in the world that wants to buy oil from it that they have to use the currency of the Northern European states. Why? Because it's essential to do that. It's essential to have a currency backed by something. It cannot be backed by nothing. Let's say, because otherwise, if that would work, then Ireland could create its own currency and be rich as hell. It doesn't work like that. You have to have a resource that everybody needs, that actually enables you to produce what you need in every aspect of life. And oil happens to be one of those things. It's a ridiculous addiction, and I'm completely against it. So as long as people keep thinking about banks and energy companies as separate things, oil companies and nuclear power plants, all this stuff, as long as they keep thinking about a marketplace which kind of self-organizes, they are trying to, let's say, organize frogs in a wheelbarrow by getting them one at a time. It doesn't work like that. You have to have a concept which is the carbon credit system, which says that banks can emit money, create money, bring it into circulation. That enables you to buy fossil fuels. That's a losing trade for the fossil fuel company, because it cannot spend that money, because if it would into the marketplace, it would enable other people to buy more fossil fuels, so it cannot really spend it. But that's the system. The system is a distribution system of fossil fuels through the banking system, and that's why it's so hard to break that regime, that fossil fuel regime. If you go to the Neuro, if you want to create a new currency and you want to give it a life in the Northern European zones, then you have to make sure that you have an oil reserve that you can only sell if it's paid for with that new currency. And then it gives lots of abilities, because then you can say, well, in the zone, if you're an industry within the zone, we give you credit as much as you want, as long as you produce some smart stuff. If you're outside the zone, you have to pay for the currency first in order to buy stuff from within the zone, including oil. And so you have to give your resources to us, including in return for the oil. So that's the only way it would work, but people are not aware of this, and they think, well, there's rich people getting very rich. That's a horrible thing, and the euro is being run out. The currency is not there anymore. That's not the mistake of the euro. It's a mistake of the banks managing it and of the system. that is completely corrupt and broken down and should be abolished. So of course you could take another approach. For instance, Ireland could do that, and they could make a new Irish pound. They could bring it into circulation and say, well, but they would also have to build immense renewable power plants, so wave power, wind power, whatever they have there. But they have plenty of room to build that, because Ireland is not very densely inhabited. And they could isolate their homes, and they could do all kinds of stuff to make their lives very, very comfortable and generate a lot of energy. And then they say, well, okay, now we have methane made through wave power or ethanol, which you can make if you have electricity. And that's a fuel, but it's also raw material for industry. We have huge power plants, or plants for making ethanol now on the coast of Ireland, where the waves are huge. So we take that energy of the waves and we put it into electricity, and then we use the electricity to make ethanol, which is an exportable product. But if you want to have the product, you have to buy our northern or southern Irish, I'm not sure. But you have to buy our Irish pounds. And because you have to do that with your currency, we can buy your stuff, even if you're the Northern European Eurozone. And that would make, you see, that's where all the productivity comes from energy. And if you don't have that energy, if you don't generate the renewable energy sources, if Ireland doesn't do that, and if it, let's say, it doesn't realize that it can do that on its own, so it's, let's say, waiting for credit, oil credit, and nothing happens, of course, for months and months, and then suddenly the banks decide, well, there's simply no more credit for you for Ireland. Okay, then it ends. Big starvation, chaos, social degradation, all the stuff you can of course calculate expect from miles away. If they don't do, in the meantime, they have the renewable energies, then the only thing they have is manual labor. So they'll be toiling in the fields, and they will be digging, and nothing will happen because cars won't run, all that stuff. And let's just accept for a fact, for a moment, this whole doom scenario where Ireland is deprived of any fossil fuels all of a sudden, because it simply cannot afford it anymore, because all the money it used to pay for it has run out. And they don't get more credit to spend more. So they cannot import anything, because the distributor that imports stuff says, okay, well, I want to ship it to your country, but our truck has to drive on something. We have to buy that gasoline or fuel. You don't have any money, so I'm not going to drive to your country. That's way too far. You should figure it out for yourself. What you have left is manual labor. That's what people can do by themselves. So there'll be farming. That's one option. But the option, of course, is that's the stupid option. The smart option is to go for renewables and make sure that you have all the energy you need to do whatever you want, and make more than you actually need so you can export it. That's, I think, the biggest opportunity of peak oil, which is that it creates equality around the world, as long as you have some kind of renewable energy source that has some potential in your country. As long as you have that, you can sustain people in that country. So all African desert countries are actually gold mines and harbingers of a really wealthy environment to live in. And many other countries, like northern countries, are even the same. Because I wrote a little piece about it, and that's the last thing I'll say in this video, because it's always very hard to keep it, let's say, linear in the story. But I was writing about cold storage. There's plans in some kind of Himalayan country, Tibet or Bhutan or something like that, to store ice in the winter. And you can say, well, okay, we have a lake and there's ice on the lake, and we get the ice from the lake in the summer, from the winter we store it somewhere. But the really smart thing that they propose to do is to make more ice, actually. To use the freezing cold to make enormous amounts of ice. To make a glacier size block of ice. Which is easy, because you simply have a block of ice and then you put some water on it, and then that freezes and you have a little bit more ice. And you put some water on that and it freezes and you have a little bit more ice. But what people could realize from that idea is that you can store heat in the summer, but you can also store cold in the winter, enormous amounts. And then, if you do that in an area of, let's say in Northern America and Canada or something like that. You just make an area where you make huge ice blocks, like they used to do in the 19th century, when ice was basically one of the biggest export products for some countries. Alaska, in order to cool everything, to keep meat fresh and stuff like that. But you can do that in Alaska, for instance. Make a huge artificial block of ice and then use that cold in the winter to drive heat engines in the summer, because then your external temperature, your outside temperature might be 20 degrees or something like that, or 15 degrees. Your ice is still minus 8 or 10 degrees or something like that in the core. And there's a temperature difference which you can exploit. So you only need to have like a huge lake with a big block of ice in it, or some kind of container. You have some ammonia flowing underneath it to extract the cold from the bottom, of course, not from the top, because the heat gets to the top and the cold gets to the bottom. And that ammonia is run through a heat engine with, on the other end of the heat engine, outside air temperature, and if you make that a little bit of concentrated sunshine, you get quite a big temperature differential, which you should be able to exploit for electricity or any other purpose. And so the summer is a period of energy collection, but in a way, if you do it the way they're proposing with these artificial glaciers, the winter, a really cold winter, is also a way to collect energy. And theoretically, you could collect cold in the winter, use it in the summer to generate heat, store that heat, and keep yourself warm in the next winter with basically the cold of the previous winter. Quite anyway, but I hope this makes sense to somebody. Technologically, it's not new, because in Germany they were thinking of heat storage, of solar heat storage, but they realized that if you store heat, then it has a problem, because it really wants to radiate that heat in a big tank. It wants to lose it. And with cold, and especially when you try to store heat on the ground where it's like 10 degrees in the basement, it's not very efficient, because there's a temperature differential which basically pulls out the heat through the insulation, etc. But if you store it in terms of cold, so if you freeze it minus 16 degrees using ammonia and all that stuff, and you do that using solar power, so you don't lose me here, but there's solar refrigeration. It's not very new, but you can do that. Then you're actually storing cold in the basement, freezing temperatures in the basement, but you can exploit them just as easily to generate power as heat. There's really no difference. As long as the temperature difference between the cold and the ambient, or the heat and the ambient, is big enough, you can exploit those gradients and generate power. Anyway, this is a little bit nerdy video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope there's gonna be more awareness in Europe of the whole credit-energy relationship. It's really exhausting for me to see all the nonsense go around, but of course that's why you have the media, to teach you nothing and to keep you as dumb as possible. So I hope other people speak out about it, and thanks for listening.